Hi, friends, it's Corey Wilkins from my studio, Ears Only Audio, here in El Cajon, California. So, I've been doing a series on microphones and kind of best practices for recording techniques and stuff like that. I found that there's lots of really great information about mixing up here on YouTube, but maybe not quite as much about tracking and how we can really improve the sound of our mixes by improving the sound of our tracks, picking the right microphones for the ultimate result that we want, standing the proper distance away when we're recording something. Again, manipulating the sound on the way in. So today we're going to take that to a whole nother level, and we're going to talk about the advantages of recording with maybe an external mic pre and some processing going on the way in. Maybe a little EQ, maybe a little bit of compression that's happening on the way into your DAW. What you're looking at here is the PreSonus tube studio channel. This is a single channel tube mic pre. You have your input level, you have your tube drive, then you have your compressor section, threshold, ratio, attack, release, gain. Then you have your compressor on off switch. Then you have your EQ section, your low band, frequency and cut and boost, your mid band, frequency, cut, boost, and Q, and your high band. You can also switch the high and low band between shelving and peak EQ, meaning if you're using a shelf and let's say you want to boost everything from 200 hertz down, you're using a shelf and you set it at 200 hertz and you boost a little bit, and it'll bring everything under 200 hertz up. Whereas if you just want a little bump at 200 hertz, you'd push the peak button in and bump up 200 hertz. The Q here for the mid-range, that just sets how narrow the band is. If you want to do like a really tight notch to reduce some mid-range noise, that's where you would do that. Then you have an output, which is kind of hiding behind the guitar out there, which will allow you to really drive your input section and drive your tube, but not clip the channel in your DAW. So we're going to dive into Pro Tools and see what this thing sounds like. All right, so we are listening to the PreSonus Tube Studio channel, which for the money is a fantastic sounding mic pre with lots of bells and whistles built in that actually sound quite good. There's a compressor that is very versatile. You can use it for a lot of things. And there's an EQ that sounds pretty decent. And of course, being able to drive a tube, an actual real vacuum tube, on the way in can really be a huge benefit if you're going for a little extra warmth, or if you really drive it and you're going for a little bit of aggression and natural sounding harmonic distortion. So let's sing a little bit. I have nothing engaged. I just have like a good level up in Pro Tools. It's actually kind of a hot level, but alas, there it is. So let's sing just a little bit, and then I'll engage a compressor. Yeah! Yeah! So we saw that we're at about -3 initially with my singing. So yeah, a little hotter than I would normally record, but let's see how much we're gaining it down here. Yeah! Yeah! So yeah, we are at -7 now instead of at -3, which means we are actually attenuating about 4 dB. So I'm going to use the makeup gain to give myself 4 dB back. Okay, now this should put my peak level back to where it was initially, around that -3 area. But it is brought up along with it some of the lower level stuff, because initially, right, I use the compressor. I don't know if you're familiar with what compression does. It's kind of beyond the scope of this video to really get into it, but in a nutshell, a compressor will push your peaks back down so they don't get quite as high. And then with the makeup gain, you're putting a floor on it. You're pushing your lower volume stuff up closer to where your peaks are. So if your dynamic range is this big, it pushes the peaks down a little bit, and then it pushes the whole thing back up a little bit. I'm using a 3-to-1 ratio, kind of a medium fast attack time, and then kind of a medium release time. And that's just sort of smoothing out the peaks. I don't want to do anything too drastic here. Just kind of smooth it out a little bit so that when it goes into the mix and I'm listening back before I've mixed anything, before I processed anything, I've already got something interesting there that sounds good and isn't getting lost, and I'm not fighting the fader the entire time. Since it's already printed this way, I can't go back and change it. So listen to it, make sure it sounds cool, and then when you're getting a time to mix, it's just a little bit, again, a little less that you have to depend on your computer for. This has already been compressed to a certain degree. You may end up needing a bit more compression. Vocals are extraordinarily dynamic, and that's okay. But this is 3 or 4 dB out of the 10 to 15 dB of gain reduction you might end up wanting eventually on your lead vocal that your computer does not have to do. So you get to save yourself a little bit of processing power by eliminating one of your compressors or having one of your compressors work a little bit less hard, and that's really good for your computer. So now I've done the makeup gain, I'll sing the same line, and we'll hear it with the compressor on and gain back up. Yeah! I'll go switch the compressor off. Yeah! And that's the difference. Okay, we have our compression dialed in, and as you can see, I kind of brought my microphone a lot closer over by my computer and shrank it down to Hobbit size because we're going to dial in a little bit of EQ. I find that my voice, this room, and most large diaphragm condensers have this sort of nasally mid-range area that doesn't really get along. I'm going to engage my EQ, and I don't really have anything else going on there, but I'm going to boost the absolute crap out of the mid-range, and I'm going to use the frequency knob to kind of sweep around until I find that area that does not like my voice. I have my Q set to as narrow as it'll go so I can find right at the center of that frequency area that just sounds really nasty. So I'm engaging my EQ now, and it is on, and as you can hear, very little has changed. You do get a little bit of change just because you're running through more circuitry. But here we go. We're going to go ahead and boost up the mid-range all the way. Okay, 1, 2, 3, we're sweeping through. See, that's too high. Okay, we're kind of getting into the area. Oh, yeah, you hear that? That's pretty nasty. Okay, that's pretty gross too, but let's find the worst offender. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. See, right in this area. That's pretty horrible. So we're going to go ahead and widen out the Q just a bit. We don't want it too wide. And now we're going to go ahead and sort of bring this down a couple of dB. Okay, we've brought that mid-band down a couple of dB. As you can see, that's already cleared it out some. I'm going to go ahead and bypass the EQ so you can hear the difference. You're going to hear a little bit of bump come up in that mid-range. 1, 2, 3. So you hear that kind of coming back. That's what we took away. We're just taking away about 2.5 dB, a pretty small dip. Let's take it back out. All right, the EQ is engaged again. I already have a clearer, less annoying sounding vocal. I'd be happy to track with this sound on the way in. And that's kind of the whole idea. Like, this sounds like a vocal that you would hear on a record, or really darn close to it. Whereas if you take away this processing, 1, 2, 3, that is not ready for big time. Everything that's going to happen to make this vocal sound really incredible is going to happen in the mixdown. My computer is going to have to do every single piece of processing to make my vocal sound great. Or I can spend some time dialing stuff in, and it sounds like that. We're just about ready to rock and roll. You could just about release that sound. So it is really worth it to go ahead and make some decisions early. There's absolutely no harm in it. And if you're nervous about doing it, you're going to make some mistakes along the way anyway. So it doesn't really matter. You're just going to have to retrack a few things until you learn, like what sounds great later on, what fits in the mix, and what really doesn't. Sometimes you're going to be way too heavy-handed with the EQ or with the compression, and you're going to have to retrack something. So what? Right? You're trying to make it sound really cool before anybody else gets their hands on it, and that's great. Or before you end up having to mix it down and you run out of processing power on your computer and you keep getting the CPU error overload. I've gotten that before, I'll tell you. So it can really be worth spending the extra time to get the sound right on the way in to save you bucket loads of time and trouble and headache trying to make it what you initially wanted it to be later on in the process. I'm Corey Wilkins for Ears Only Audio. Thank you so much again for watching. Don't forget to stop by my website, CoreyWilkins.com. And I hope this helps you record really amazing vocals. Thanks again. I'll talk to you real soon.